During the colonial era and the transatlantic slave trade, European colonizers and slave traders introduced several diseases to indigenous populations in the Americas, Africa, and other colonized regions. These diseases often had devastating effects, as the native populations had no previous exposure and therefore no immunity to them. Some of the most significant diseases transmitted during this period include: smallpox was one of the deadliest diseases introduced to the New World by Europeans. It spread rapidly among indigenous populations, causing high mortality rates. The impact was catastrophic, leading to significant population declines and social disruption. The introduction of smallpox is notably tied to Hernán Cortés and his conquest of the Aztec Empire, where the disease decimated the native population. Measles, like smallpox, was highly contagious and deadly for indigenous populations. Outbreaks of measles caused widespread illness and death, further weakening societies already struggling with the effects of colonization. Measles outbreaks were common in the wake of European contact, contributing to the high mortality rates among Native American tribes. Influenza outbreaks, particularly the strains brought by Europeans, caused significant mortality among native populations. The rapid spread of influenza led to repeated epidemics that affected both the colonizers and the indigenous people. Influenza often accompanied other diseases, exacerbating their impact. Typhus, transmitted by lice, thrived in the crowded and unsanitary conditions often found on slave ships and in colonial settlements. It caused high fevers, rash, and often death, contributing to the high mortality rates among enslaved Africans and indigenous populations. The harsh conditions of the Middle Passage, the transatlantic journey of enslaved Africans, facilitated the spread of typhus. Tuberculosis was another disease that spread rapidly in the cramped, unsanitary conditions of slave ships and colonial settlements. It caused chronic respiratory illness and had a significant impact on public health in colonized regions. Tuberculosis often became a chronic problem in colonial settlements, affecting both settlers and indigenous people. While malaria was already present in many tropical regions, European colonizers sometimes exacerbated its spread by disrupting local environments and increasing mosquito breeding grounds. The introduction of non-immune populations also contributed to the disease's impact. Malaria significantly affected European colonizers in Africa, earning the nickname "White Man's Grave." Syphilis was a sexually transmitted infection that spread rapidly through contact between European sailors, colonizers, and indigenous populations. It had severe health consequences, including chronic illness and death. There is historical debate about the origin of syphilis, with one theory suggesting it was brought to Europe by sailors returning from the Americas with Christopher Columbus. Regardless, its spread was facilitated by colonial interactions. Yellow fever, transmitted by mosquitoes, was another disease that affected both Europeans and indigenous populations in tropical regions. European colonizers often brought new strains or facilitated its spread through environmental changes. Yellow fever outbreaks were particularly deadly in the Caribbean and parts of South America. The introduction of these diseases had profound and often devastating effects on indigenous populations and enslaved Africans. The lack of immunity among these groups led to high mortality rates and significant social and cultural disruption. In many cases, entire communities were decimated, which weakened resistance to colonization and facilitated European domination. While indigenous populations suffered greatly, European colonizers and slave traders also faced challenges from diseases. Malaria and yellow fever, in particular, caused significant mortality among Europeans in tropical colonies, impacting colonial administration and settlement efforts. The legacy of disease transmission during the colonial era is still felt today. The demographic and social changes brought about by these diseases have had long-lasting effects on the populations and cultures of the Americas, Africa, and other colonized regions. In summary, the transmission of diseases such as smallpox, measles, influenza typhus, tuberculosis, malaria, syphilis, and yellow fever by European colonizers and slave traders had a profound impact on indigenous populations and enslaved Africans, leading to high mortality rates and significant social disruption. These diseases played a major role in the colonization process, facilitating European domination and altering the demographic landscape of the colonized regions.